25 Evacuate. Teacher, I understand that India deliberately allowed the second Mumbai massacre to happen, in fact, to find an excuse for the war. Lin Huaisheng hurried to remedy. Well, I'm confused, I can't see the clues in such a clear thing. Well, let's talk about intelligence. After the Mumbai incident in 2008, India established a patrol boat base on Kavalathi Island, you know this. I don't know this yet. Lin Huaisheng shook his head and said. This base was established by the Indian military in order to prevent the penetration of the sea from the Arabian Sea, but as we later learned, on April 3, the missile boat base in Dabayalan received a message requesting all 4 of the patrol team. The patrol boat, on April 5, arrived at the Goa shipyard for its annual overhaul. It turns out that they are letting terrorists into the territory. Lin Huaisheng nodded repeatedly, but he thought to himself, you have all this information. Didn't tell me, where should I go to analyze? So, it is not difficult to see India's determination to go to war. The second Mumbai incident on April 6 was actually an excuse that Khan and his Ministry of Defence dreamed of. From the perspective of world politics, India has been worried that after bin Laden's death, the relationship between Pakistan and the United States will be repaired in a few years, so this is the best time window. I think India's timing is good. From a war perspective, too, said Lin Huaisheng. What do you think? Talk about it? Teacher, I think so, not only the attitude of the United States, but in terms of seasons, their pressure in other directions is obviously the least. They know very well that in the past 6 months, whether it is in Aksai Chin, or in southern Tibet, it is impossible for our army to launch an attack, so they can bring back a lot of troops from the forward strongholds or the deeper Imphal area. Well, this analysis is not bad. If this is the case, I am thinking that this is an unsolvable problem for our plan. Since India has planned for a long time, their ground attack plan must be very perfect. We can't expect the Pakistan army to resist for too long. Their main force is in the north, but judging from the actions of India's airstrike on Lahore, the real attack may be launched from the south. In that case, although India will be under huge political pressure, but in turn, great success will be achieved in the military, and I don't think such an assumption can be ruled out. Well, it makes sense, you can add this to your report, and the report can appropriately add your personal judgment. But not too much, do you understand what I mean? I still don't quite understand. Then you can talk about it in the last section, but don't be too subjective, you must pay attention to your level and authority, you are not a decision maker. Major General Su shook his head and made his words clearer. I see. By the way, let me tell you, the head of the analysis meeting tomorrow will not be present, lest some countries misjudge, but the head will watch the live broadcast of the meeting nearby, and I will also be there. If the head has question, I'll call you to ask. What level of chief, so mysterious? I saw a Boeing 737 on the runway, isn't it? Pay attention to discipline, don't ask questions that shouldn't be asked. I hope you know that, despite your low rank, what you say can have a crucial impact on decision making, and you should weigh it. After India declared a state of war, the whole world was shocked, and Pakistan was caught in the wrong of the whole country. Most Pakistanis believed that India would not expand the war at least until the United Nations investigation team had left. But the current war situation shows that Prime Minister Khan is not just talking about it. The airstrikes of the Indian Air Force have no strict areas. They attack all airports close to the border at will, which makes the defense of the entire Pakistani army in a state of ignoring one and the other. Like other airports close to the eastern border, the entire day at Kalmar Airport is spent in a panicked scene. It is one of the main airports of the 33rd Multi-Role Fighter Wing of the Pakistan Air Force. India's bomb has not yet been dropped here, but Pakistan is a country with a long and narrow territory, so there is no place for complete insurance. Every few minutes, A plane takes off on the runway, and most of the planes that take off are not for combat, but are diverted to the airport further west, closer to Afghanistan, so as not to be blown up on the ground. The concern of the Pakistan Air Force staff is not unreasonable. It is within the attack range of the Indian Su-30 Mki. The straight line distance from the Kerwala base where the Su-30 Mki of the 31st Lion Squadron is located is only 450 kilometers. That is to say, the Su-30 can fly over Kamal half an hour after liftoff and drop 10 tons of bombs, enough to destroy their most hated 13th Squadron, equipped with Saab 2000 early warning aircraft, several times. Within 10 hours, Indian attack aircraft had approached the airport several times. Fortunately, a newly deployed air defense brigade in the direction of Wa scared the opponent. Several MiG-27 UPGs were preparing to sneak in the morning and noon. But after the ground-to-air radar was turned on, it turned around and retracted immediately. The Indian pilot dropped the cluster bombs with parachutes on the farmland south of Islamabad. These bombs seemed to be specially configured to wipe out the aircraft group on the side of the runway. If they dispatched a more advanced fleet, it would be difficult to ensure that the airport would not be attacked. So far, such a thing has not happened. It can be seen that the Indian military also has a contradictory mentality. They are determined to fight a full-scale war, but they do not willing to move the expensive Su-30. Major Song Ning of the Chinese Air Force delegation stood on a mound next to the runway, watching a huge C-130 transport plane take off, rumble and turn westward. Then a Phantom 5 fighter bomber on the runway moved slowly with a roar at the end of the runway, ready to take off. This Phantom did not carry any bombs, only fuel tanks. Obviously, his mission was to retreat, and the Pakistan Air Force, which seemed to have always been professional, was indeed stunned. It can be seen that their air command can only be adapted to medium-scale conflict. At this moment, Major Song Ning, who watched the planes take off one after another, was very anxious. He was the head of the delegation, and the two J-10 fighter jets waiting to be handed over were still parked in the base's hangar. If the Indian Air Force, when it strikes, those conspicuous aircraft castles will obviously be the primary targets. According to the original arrangement, the two latest B-shaped planes were to be handed over to the Pakistani pilots for several test flights and then signed for delivery. In fact, India and Pakistan are already in a state of full-scale war. If something goes wrong, Song Ning feels that he can't afford it, knowing that these two expensive fighter jets have not been paid for. These are Nighthawks. Hearing someone talking next to him, Song Ning looked back and saw that it was Colonel Sami, who was the most difficult to deal with in the space. Not as nervous as others. Have you flown? I have flown all the planes of the Pakistan Air Force. Well, except for the F-16C of the 5th Squadron, they won't let me touch it out of jealousy. Where are these planes going? Song Ning, facing the Phantom that was about to take off, he raised his head and asked. Peshawar, or Mian Walid Airport, in short, to avoid the limelight. The Indians are crazy. Hundreds of sorties have been dispatched today, and 3 front-line airports have been bombed. The first thing that the Air Force staff thought of was to hide the plane. Get up, not attack, you should beat them all down. The wing has no combat missions today. Song Ning asked. Of course, if escaping is considered a combat mission. The colonel shook his head and said, looking disappointed.